Coogs House. All right, we know the Houston Cougars are entering the Big 12 in just under 2 months, but there's been a lot of shakeup across the college football landscape, and does it look like there might be some more teams from the Atlantic area coming in? Let's look at this.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, that break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or it's a hater can step by, please be sure to get subscribed down below. That way you latest on the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. It is good to see you again. We are approaching that 1,250 subscriber mark. Remember, every 250 are going the way. At 1,250, it's at like this one, Cougar Pro on the front. It's got the Locked On the back. It's a Nike Dry Fit, brand new, all ready for you. Just hit subscribe so it gets to 1250, and then like and comment to make sure we know you're in the contest. If after talking to some about conference alignment and facilities and Kelvin Sampson, you're like, I just need a break for a second and talk about something else, tell us down below if you're more of a strawberry kiwi or a strawberry banana person. There are just two options. All right, so today's episode, I want to talk about a couple things. One, the first segment here is going to be looking at, does the Big 12, a.k.a. where we're about to be playing football, need to be looking somewhere besides the Pac-12 for what comes next? The second segment, speaking of the Big 12 and where we're going, I want to talk some about this new facility that the board just approved and signed off on a major expenditure for, and kind of put that in some context. And then in the third segment, I want to kind of wrap up yesterday's conversation with or about Kelvin Sampson, because it looks like there may be some more dotting of I's and crossing of T's involved in all that. But first, let's talk about the news and conference alignment this week, and as it pertains to Houston, a member of the Big 12 Conference, because the Big 12 kind of interestingly sits in the middle of that. To this point, you've talked a lot about the Pac-12 and how it's kind of falling apart. USC, UCLA going to the Big 10. That means that there are obviously only a handful. It's just 10 schools there, but the big marquee dollars come from those LA schools. So, you know, you got Phil Knight in Oregon, but outside of that, schools like, well, where can we make our money? The other thing to hear is that the Pac-12 TV rights deal continues to look less and less impressive as we make jokes about the CW, but they are increasingly looking like, per all the reporting, that they're going to have fairly minimal money, especially not compared to like what the Big 12 will be getting starting in 2024, moving into that 2031 contract. So the Pac-12 has kind of been the focus here. There are some like-minded schools in Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado being a former Big 12 school itself, and would call the four corner schools because we pull those in. You already have BYU coming in. You can have some nice crossover there. Tech is not that far from any of these places. Got a nice like middle point. And I have to say that makes a lot of sense geographically. Brett Yormark has said he wants a national conference, coast-to-coast conference, that gets you, depending on the time of year, I guess, with Arizona, because they don't do daylight savings time, into that Pacific time zone. However, with news this week, it actually looks like the more likely thing almost might be the Atlantic Coast Conference heading the other direction. They're in a TV deal that currently runs through 2036. Yes, that's correct. 2036. For instance, the Big 12 deal that officially restarts in 2024 will have already been completely re-upped in 2031. And that's, who knows where they go from there. They may be entering a third summer of 2036. But reports from Brett McMurphy, amongst others, have been that schools are looking for grant rights with their lawyers and thus theoretically looking for ways to get out. I think the big thing here is the big story is Florida State maybe kind of leading the charge here. Florida State and Miami in their current TV deals both look like they're going to very quickly be making less money on TV revenue than Central Florida, who is coming to the Big 12. And for whatever it's worth, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina State, UVA, Virginia Tech, all apparently have been meeting with lawyers and collectively about like what do they do? Can they get out of this? Can they renegotiate this? And in all of that frenzy, the Big 12 is saying here like, hey, we're into getting bigger, folks. We can do this get bigger thing. I think there's a couple natural fits in this whole thing to keep an eye on. Florida or Florida State would get the conference into the rest of Florida. We know that Florida State feels SEC-like. Could the Big 12 go get Miami? You have a natural rivalry there with UCF. You also kind of tie into the southern part of the state there. I mean, the state of Miami and the way that they used to play. You could go pull some of those recruits because you'd be playing a game a year in Florida, theoretically. The other part of that is Miami is a private school, not religious like TCU, Baylor, but not horribly different either as far as like the rest of the school culturally. So I could see that being a tie-in there. I could see Miami coming in that instance, and then having the partner in UCF. Georgia Tech is very academic, and this would feel more like a Big Ten school if the ACC were to completely dissolve. But personally, I like to see the Big 12 look there because Houston with Doug Belk has great ties to recruiting Georgia. Adding a Georgia school to the conference would only increase that theoretically. Georgia, Florida operate a lot very similarly as a like single unit right with the state borders there. As far as other schools in the conference go, Virginia again feels academic like the Big Ten. Virginia Tech though has the rivalry with West Virginia right there in the region, gets the Big 12 into the DMV. That's a big deal for recruiting bases. DMV has great athletics, great football, great basketball, and not bad baseball and track. It's a good spot to be in as well. I also then see, if you're just taking all these schools, that Louisville is not far from Cincinnati. Neither is Pitt. Pitt also has the long-standing rivalry with West Virginia. Do you get Pitt involved in this too? And then they just have the conference rival. It's a really easy sales pitch to their board and boosters. The wild card here, I think, is what do North Carolina and Duke do? I think Clemson feels SEC-like, and so I don't know that it'd be great to have them in the Big 12, but if they do their own thing, they do their own thing. What do Carolina and Duke do? I guess could they join a Big East even or something like that because they're so basketball focused. But in that same region of the Carolinas, I'm got my eye on Wake Forest and NC State. Wake Forest, again, that same private school kind of mold, but has strong athletics. Obviously, the basketball program has put out guys like Tim Duncan or Chris Paul, but has that same kind of history and legacy. The football program has had a strong, it was like the late 2000s, early 2010s. They've had it in the past, and frankly, it would help get the Big 12 in Houston into the region and recruiting. NC State has a loud, passionate fan base. If you're not familiar with the region, locally in the state of North Carolina, there's like Duke and Carolina, like the T-shirt fans. They're the Texas and Texas A&M of here, right? Where like people don't have to be fans of them don't have to have gone to them to be fans of them. NC State has a much bigger stronghold on like a network of alumni fans in the region. Because of that, would be a good ad, I think, as well to get into that area and region. For what it's worth, all these reports are about the ACC and what that does to that conference as it falls apart. And so I'm then picking, how could you pull this school in? How could you pull this school into the Big 12? Notably, the ACC playing on the Atlantic coast does not make the Big 12 conference, go coast to coast like we're talking about. But the pressure in and of itself of saying, hey, we're open to adding Miami and Pitt, or hey, NC State and Va Tech, we're pulling them in. Just that pressure in and of itself may force the hand of the Pac-12. It may pack it up right there on its own because, frankly, if you're Utah, you've got Colorado, Arizona State, you're sitting there looking at what's happening, and you're looking across the country at the ACC falling apart, and the Big 12 just pulled in 4 schools. Now, admittedly, they net 2 because they lose 2, but the Big 12 is getting bigger. If they talk about adding a few Atlantic Coast Conference schools, that's even bigger. How much bigger is the Big 12 really going to do at once? This window of like a 2-year span here of adding a bunch of schools, how much bigger can the Big 12 realistically get to at once? And if you don't jump in now and you have your spot taken by an Atlantic Coast Conference school, are you kicking it too far down the curb, or down the line, I should say, and then setting yourself up for a regression while falling into a Pac-12 media deal that makes anywhere between a third and a half, depending on which reports you're reading, as much money as the Big 12 schools do. Do you risk that, or do you just jump in and say, hey, go ahead and add Pitt, but we're going to add Arizona State. We'll see you there. And we go coast to coast with this thing. Like, does that force your hand as a Pac-12 institution? Or, frankly, does it give the Big 12 kind of the safety net? Like, hey, we're going to get somebody and keep this thing growing and continue to become the biggest conference in America, the biggest power conference in America, and continue to grow towards that. I'm not sure which way it ends up going. I do know that Brett Yormark is watching all of this, paying attention to all of this, and you bet that if he's hearing of athletics directors or college presidents at Clemson, FSU, Miami, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, all talking to lawyers about getting out of their current TV contract, he's like, hey, we haven't quite put the ink in ours. You want in? He is making that phone call. I can guarantee it. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. Follow that ACC news and then continue to connect the dots of if this is happening on one side of the country, is the other side of the country singing, getting scared, etc. Who's going to be the first to jump ship out of those two conferences and join the Big 12, which is comfortably as the third power conference right now. And then again, by 2031, if the conference has grown that much, does it help elevate the conference as an entity for these TV right deals and really help it get, close that gap? We shall see. Now, we have a few more other things to talk about today, but if we're going to talk about, improved football facilities, football facilities have offices, they have gyms, they have weight rooms, they have meeting rooms, and, that can require a lot of different styles of pants, or it can require one set of bird dogs, because bird dogs are both the pants that will make you look better and feel better. They are comfortable. They look great. They're versatile. You can wear them to the gym, at the front of the class teaching history. You can walk out on a date with them. You can wear them in the pool. They really do go everywhere. Bird dogs are super, super comfortable. I'm not going to stand up and show my pants to the camera right now, but they are comfortable enough to sit here and podcast in throughout the night. They are comfortable enough to wear this pair to the gym tomorrow. And then the long pants, I have to wear pants to work, but the long pants I'll be wearing to work on Monday. Trust me, grab yourself a set of bird dogs. And if you go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, they will be so happy that you heard this and went there because, oh my God, Parker, but they'll also send you a free Yeti style tumbler with the Bird Dogs logo on it. It's a really, really cool tumbler as well. I should probably get mine. It's a really, really cool tumbler that will send you along the way. So make sure you go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Tell them we sent you. Throw in the tumbler in your order. Make sure you do it. Bird dogs go anywhere. Bird dogs are super comfortable and look great. Bird dogs, the best pants you can buy. All right. So I said in the second segment, I want to talk some about this new facility and all the things that it offers supposedly. I should point out, I guess, and open with, this was originally planned to be a $75 million extension on the football. It's a football operations building. It's got the offices, the film rooms, the meeting rooms, the weight rooms, the locker rooms, etc., all right there next to TDECU Stadium. And it was originally going to be $75 million. The board just approved on Thursday afternoon an extension to a $140 million budget for this operations center. The way the pitch goes apparently is that $118.3 million will go to construction alone. It's that much. It's that size and intricate of a building. And then $21.7 million go to things like the architecture firms, the engineering, the testing, interior furniture, all of those kinds of things lump into the other a little less than, I should say, $22 million. That's a lot of money put into construction alone. That implies a large facility. The mock-ups of the new version are coming, so we can see those as well and talk through those this summer, I'm sure. Really, really fun to look at that. And frankly, a lot of chatter online was like, this is the Big 12, this is the money, and this is really, really exciting. And I think that that's fair. It's more than Houston has spent on a football facility that was not the game field itself in a long time. The investment, the reinvestment, the extension of the investment on the board implies a seriousness that I think should be commended, and it's exactly what we need as we continue to grow this. Dana Holgerson has said that we need newer facilities to keep up in the Big 12, need bigger facilities to keep up in the Big 12. Kelvin Sampson has said the same. Coach Whitting with the baseball program has said the same. We need to keep up with the Big 12 by adding to and growing and expanding the facilities we've got. That takes money. The board approved more money. However, it took some just very simple, quick Googling to realize that like $140 million for the football ops center is like kind of just par for the course. Now, in looking at things like Oklahoma jumped out as having just passed a $250 million renovation of their facility, similar, operations building in March. $250 million on the renovation, right? We're talking real cash here. Now, I understand Oklahoma's a big deal, and you could argue they're going to the SEC, and that makes a lot more money on the TV deal, so that's why they could almost put it on credit, right? And be like, money is going to be coming in a couple years anyway. But like TCU's football ops facility cost $164 million, and they paid for it several years ago. And so you start looking at like, oh, well, things are getting newer, bigger, and better. Their next new building, if we're going to be a new building or the renovation or whatever, is going to continue to grow on that $24 million gap. Baylor of all places, down in Waco, Texas, has a football stadium that costs $260 million. And they just approved in February a $90 million extension / renovation of the facilities. That's going to put the entire dollar amount and all the things they spent on that stadium upwards of $350 million. That's a lot of cash. And I'm not saying Houston has to have that. Frankly, Texas Tech had, they just passed or accepted or the board approved of a $220 million extension and project I'm doing with their football stadium. They're doing it in chunks, and the first $100 million chunk is going to have a bunch of stuff, the south end zone, It's worth pointing out that was passed since football season ended. I think it was in like February. It might have been like January, actually, if I'm looking at this. Anyway, right, just passed. They already have 87 of the $100 million, right? This is how things work in the Big 12. This is new to us. It's a great first step. It's going to be this phenomenal facility. It's going to really improve the program, and the board did the right thing in doing it. But also, we can't rest on our laurels with this. We can't sit here and say, we did it. We built the stadium. We built the football ops building. We're done. Now go win some darn football games, because these things don't stop. This money only grows. It only gets more expensive. And I'm not saying that to say that, we have to take a bunch of public funding, this and this, that, and the other thing. We can take the TV money, take donations, take however privately funding you want to do it, whichever way the board wants to go on that. What I will say, though, is that we've got to continue to keep up, because these facilities matter. Recruits notice. If a kid that's a 5-star from the city of Houston goes to U of H and sees a facility that is a B+, and goes to Waco and sees a facility that is an A+, and goes to Tech and sees a facility that is an A+, and goes to UT Austin and sees a facility that is an A+, and goes to LSU and sees the facility that is an A+, at some point, they're going to wonder why the U of H one is so different. It's going to stick out if they don't continue to keep up and continue to grow and progress. If you don't believe me, look at what recruits say themselves. They talk about, in the modern era, they talk about NIL money, and the opportunity will be how they phrase it. They'll talk about development and the facilities to develop them and the coaching staff to develop them. Coaching staffs go where their facilities are great too, because they know that with their coaching pedigree or their coaching style, using a top-tier facility will help develop pro athletes, which will help get future pro athletes, and so on and so forth. The facilities matter a whole heck of a lot in this recruiting game. And if you're entering into a Power 5 conference, you're going to have to continue to kill it in the recruiting game. We both know the recruits are in Houston. We talk about this every single day. The everydayer in you is nodding. I get it. But we talk about the recruits being in Houston every single day. The issue is keeping them here. Moving the Big 12 is a big step. We're keeping some of them. We really are. We're going to see it continue to grow and rise. And frankly, if they continue to do things like this step, that numbers only of high-end Houstonian kids is only going to go up. High-end Texas kids coming to Houston is only going to go up. But you can't call it done. the job is not done. You can't be satisfied and move on. You've got to continue to move. Now, in the third segment, I want to talk about Kelvin Sampson because he has been adamant about like this being important for what Houston wants to do. And he really also, like, even in the interviews fairly recently, has been talking about like how that's the next step. Showing off the Fertitta Center is great, but showing off an improved practice facility, improved locker room, et cetera, matters. So let's jump on in and talk about, I guess, the latest. Kelvin Sampson on what was that? Wednesday afternoon, reports leaked out on a Woj bomb that he had taken a visit to see the Milwaukee Bucks, and in doing so, he wanted to talk with them about, or they talk with him about the open head coaching position. Worth pointing out that that's the same front office people. The GM is from the front office when Coach Sampson was there as an assistant in the NBA. For whatever you want to add to that, like, they are friends, and Sampson has a number of friends across the NBA and the basketball world. And it sounds like this was a true just visit, but they talked about the gig. And that sent a lot of rockets, a lot of Cougar Twitter. I'm getting my NBA stuff confused. A lot of Cougar Twitter in a tizzy, because it's like, oh, great. This is feeling like Tom Herman. This is a guy that builds the program and then bounces for bigger, greener pastures. And I don't think that's the case this time. I've been proven wrong before, but as I watch this, I just don't think that's the case. First of all, I want to shout out the guys at Houston Roundball Review. Andy Yanez has been on this show a couple times, but Andy and Chris and a guy named Will had on Kelvin Sampson kind of by happenstance to just shoot the breeze and talk on Thursday around lunchtime on that channel. You can go check them out after you get your Locked On Daily stuff in. But I do think it's worth pointing out that, like, they didn't talk with him about it a whole lot. They talked to him about 40 minutes and kind of briefly mentioned some of the things, but didn't talk about it a whole lot. Where we really got more insight on it was, weirdly, he was scheduled to throw the first pitch out at Thursday night's game between Houston Cougars and Cincinnati in baseball. And he scheduled to throw the first pitch. He's out there warming up, and cameras and microphone stuff are all out there asking him questions. He's clearly annoyed. And I don't mean it like he's rude or disrespectful, because he was not. But he's like, guys, this is not like, this was a visit. We're working on contract stuff. He's working on some fine tuning of his extension. It sounds like his assistant's extensions may more or less be done or close to done. And he mentioned that once those are finalized, it sounds like he'll be next. And that's a very common thing that good head coaches do, is they require you to, like, hey, you got to sign my assistants first to make sure they kind of have the guys they want set up the way they want on the staff. He said he had just talked to his agent. Again, this was Thursday night baseball game. He just talked to his agent Thursday afternoon. They're literally just going back and forth on some things. It sounds like to me, in listening to / reading between the lines, that they're really just finalizing plans on Kelvin Sampson getting what he wants on his exodus. They are setting up what I assume is Kelvin Sampson taking over once Kelvin Sampson decides to call it quits and retire, and getting that language and getting that specifically as they want it to be in the contract extension is going to be challenging. And I would also point out is going to be important to Kelvin, and having these things like NBA offers in his back pocket will only make his case strong. It's like, okay, if you're not going to give the job to my son, then we're going to just both bounce to the big leagues, right? I mentioned in yesterday's bonus episode that it's not just helping Kelvin out. If he really is friends with these guys in the NBA, they can theoretically offer their head coaching options maybe a little bit less money, maybe a little bit less out of their pockets, because, like, look, we can go get Kelvin for a lot less money, because college coaches make a lot less money than pro coaches. Kelvin Sampson making, not quite $3.5 million. Budenholzer, the guy that just fired Milwaukee, was making $8 million, right? So they can say, listen, you may want $8 million like Budenholzer, but we're going to give you $6 million, or you can walk, because we can get Sampson for $5 million, right? And that kind of, like, cat and mouse is what's happening in those contract discussions as well. I did think it was interesting, because knowing that Sampson has friends across the NBA from his time spent there, and it's just his time spent in basketball, honestly, he acted like these talks and visits happen more frequently than we may realize. It's truthfully just that this one got leaked because of the high profile of the Milwaukee Bucks. He didn't say this, but I'm putting it in. The Bucks have one of the best, if not the best, on a given day, basketball players in the whole world. Right? Whoever gets that coaching job is getting a fantastic coaching job. They just won the NBA championship in 2021. Right? We're talking not even 24 months away from that team hoisting a trophy, and like all of Milwaukee going nuts about it. Right? This one leaked because it's a big deal and a big job. I do think it's interesting that he has all these friends that he mentioned and that this is commonplace. I also think that at the end of the day, he's not pulling one over on us when he's saying, look, I want to come back. We just got to get the contract worked out. It's just a matter of time. I'm coming back. Right. I think the deal here with that is that if Sampson didn't think that, or if there was more question in that, my experience is that he would just not be talking about it. He'd be refusing questions. Like, look, I can't say anything. I got a lawyer. Look, I can't say anything. It's not done. And he would just not be talking about it. That he's talking about it makes me think he's being honest about it, because he's the kind of guy that if he can't be honest about it, he won't talk, right? And to be fair, that speaks to his honesty, his integrity, and the kind of things that we love about him as a coach. And I think that that's all that's happening here. I will say the Woj bomb was scary. I will say that if the Sampsons both left Houston, I'd have a lot of questions about what comes next for the university. It's an attractive program in the Big 12. You could theoretically get a great coach, but I hope we don't do that for a long, long time. I want to see Kelvin Sampson win a national title here and retire, give it to his son, and let them take the thing on for several more decades. It'd be a lot more fun that way to watch their success go that way. If you think I'm off base on any of this, if you think it's more serious than that with Kelvin Sampson, if you think the facilities are going to be good enough, if you think I'm talking a bunch of noise with the ACC and it don't matter, tell me at Painsworth 512, PAINSWORTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all your favorite social media handles. You can also feel free to comment down below on the video. I'll be sure to get back to those the best I can if I feel like it's one worth warranting getting back to. But I am really active on Twitter, so make sure you find me at Painsworth 512, PAINSWORTH 512, wherever you log into social media. Thank you so much for being Locked on Cougs, your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, I'm going to recommend Locked on Pac-12. You can hear more about the TV contracts there. I'm telling you, I'm not far off. Those things are low. Now, Spencer's fairly optimistic, so maybe you can go argue with him about it, at least mentally argue with him about it. Don't be mean to Spencer. He's a good dude. He came on when we talked about Oregon earlier. He's a good dude. Also, I want to recommend Locked on Rockets because Jackson Gatlin's doing a great job covering the reality of the number 4 pick for the city of Houston. All right. Thank you all so much again for being Locked on Cougs for listening to the day. Locked on Cougs is a proud member of the Locked on Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.